Fortunately, finding installers for Subversion is helped considerably by the CollabNet website. Here you'll find many installer packages for a wide variety of operating systems. I'm going straight to the download page for Subversion, but I encourage you to take a look around the rest of the site. It has various other Subversion related resources that you may find useful. On the Subversion download page, the first two items are the Windows packages. Across the top are some buttons that will take you to packages for other operating systems. There are two packages for Windows. One contains the client and the server, and the other contains only the command line client. Since you will generally only install the server a few times but the client may be installed many times, it's worth downloading both packages. However, here I'm going to download only the larger client and server package, since I will be setting up my server for use in the subsequent lessons. The first time that you access the CollabNet site, you'll be asked to register. This is very simple and does not require you to surrender much more than an email address. Once you're registered, you can use your username and password on subsequent visits. I'm already registered, so I just enter my username and password to proceed with the download. After running the usual gauntlet of Windows dialogues, we get to the download window, and here I'm going to save the package to my desktop. In order to successfully complete the installation process, you will need to have administrator rights on the box. Run the installer. Click through the first two screens. On the third screen, we have a decision to make about which server components to install. We can have svnserv, that's Subversion's own dedicated server, or Apache mod dav svn. This will install the Apache 2 web server and configure it to serve Subversion repositories. The various methods of serving repositories is covered in detail in Module 2. If you're setting up a machine to follow along with this training, then ensure that both the svnserv and Apache options are selected and click Next. Assuming that you selected to install the svnserv server, the next screen will allow you to configure the options for svnserv. These options are described in more detail in Module 2. Briefly, the options dictate which port the SVN server will listen on. You should leave this as 3690 unless you have a good reason not to. The path from which the server will serve repositories, set this to anything convenient. The installer will make the directory specified if it doesn't already exist. And finally, an option to have the server start as a Windows service. Leave this option checked unless you need to run the server manually for some reason. Frankly, even if you need to stop and start the server manually, I would still choose to install it as a service. Click Next. If you selected to install the Apache server, the next screen will allow you to configure it. The first block tells Apache where to run. I am leaving the hostname set to localhost because I intend to use this installation for training only. If you're installing Subversion for more general use, then enter the hostname of the server. The next parameter is the port on which Apache will listen. This defaults to the standard HTTP port, port 80. If you already have a web server running, or you would prefer to keep port 80 for some other reason, then simply change the port number here. Finally, select whether the Apache server should be run as a Windows service. As before, unless you have a specific reason for not running Apache as a service, leave this box checked. The final block of parameters on this page determine how Apache will serve Subversion repositories. The repository path tells Apache where your repositories will be hosted. This can be different to the one you supplied to the SVN server, in which case you'll have two repository areas, one served by svnserv, the other by Apache. For following along with this training, specify the same path for both. The repository location prefix is used by Apache to distinguish accesses to Subversion. URLs to access Subversion will be of the general form http://hostname/ the prefix supplied here and, depending on how you create your repositories, a repository name or the path into the single repository served from Apache. These URLs are described in detail in Module 2. So, for the default /svn repository location prefix and localhost hostname, URLs will be of the form http:// localhost/svn/repository name. Finally, there's a checkbox to enable View VC. View VC allows your repository to be browsed through a web browser. If you want to install this option, then you will need to install ActiveState's ActivePython 2.5 before running this installation. So stop now, install Python and rerun this process. Since this training does not cover View VC, I'm going to leave this unchecked. Once you're happy with your selections, click Next. On the next screen, choose a location for Subversion to be installed to. All the components you select for installation will be put under this directory, so if you already have an Apache installation, the Subversion installation will not interfere with it. When you click Next, the installation will begin. Once installation is completed, the final screen offers the chance to open the Open CollabNet site. If you don't want to visit the site, then uncheck the box. Otherwise, leave it checked and click Finish. I'm going to do a few post-installation checks, just to make sure everything was installed as I expected. Start up the command line. First, to check that the Subversion command line client is installed. A simple version check shows that the command line client SVN has installed, and the version confirms that the correct version is being used. Next, use the file manager to confirm the directory that will contain our repositories has been created. If you installed both Apache and SVN serve and specified different directories during installation, then check that both directories are present. Now use the SVN admin command line client to create a test repository. Again, if you have two repository directories, do this for both. I'm calling my test repository test. Next, a quick check that the SVN client can access the repositories directly. Note that there are 3 slashes after the file colon. This is required. The empty response is what we expect. If you get any error, then something's gone wrong. Let's make sure that the services are installed. Open up the Services Control panel and look for the Apache 2.2 service and the Subversion Server service. Okay, the two services are there, but neither's currently running, so let's start the SVN serve service and try accessing the test repository using it. Specifying the SVN protocol at the beginning of the URL tells the client to attempt to contact the SVN serve service. Again, the blank line tells me that everything's fine. Back to the Services Control panel to start the Apache server. We got an error. To start the Apache service successfully, we need to reboot the machine. Since the two services were set to start automatically, they're both running following the reboot. So our final post-installation test is to access the repositories through the Apache server. We do this using the same svn command as before, but specifying an HTTP URL. And there it is, a blank line telling us that there's nothing in this repository. And that's it. We've finished installing the command line client along with the two servers, SVN serve and Apache.